If you think you know your partner, think again. This is the story of a man who never thought his wife would cheat on him until a chance conversation with her buddy happened. Now he's ready to share his story and how he found out the truth that turned his life upside down. Keep watching to find out how he handled this shock and what happened next. I'll start my story by remembering a famous phrase. You have to be careful what you dream in life, for it may happen that those dreams will come true someday. My now ex-wife proved this truth to me by her example. And even to be honest, I still do not fully understand what it was all about. I met Tanya when she was still at university. I, of course, being my wife's eldest, was already working, but she was still finishing her studies at the institute. She still had her final exams, and that was it. Adulthood entirely out of it. Like many girls her age, she was on social media, and she definitely stumbled upon the topic of so-called equal rights. It is now fashionable, but I fortunately did not notice that this topic is somehow particularly interesting to her. And that, of course, I was happy about. We talked to her many times about our introduction to life, and from all these conversations, and with and without alcohol, I realized that living as a large family with children and not working is probably my wife's dream. And generally speaking, she doesn't have any strong career aspirations. Her ambitions have been strictly in the realm of the home. And in her career, as I understood it, I was the one who was supposed to move. Anyway, while she was graduating from college, I received an offer. In the next town from ours, literally 150 kilometers away, there is a branch of the firm in which I now work. The essence of the proposal is simple. The branch kind of had a change in management, and we sent his immediate supervisor from here to head the branch there. Andrike, being on good terms with me, of course calls me along. I had to think I would have to rent an apartment there, and everything else, I told him. What is there to think about? Here you are an ordinary employee, you see the competition among workers in a large branch, and there you will be a deputy chief. The salary is higher, you have more authority, the more you are young, you have nothing to be afraid of, and why not take a chance? And after a couple of days he persuaded me, and who knew that this proposal would change my life, not only in the field of work. I did not announce that there is a real opportunity, as they say, promotion, but to my great surprise, I did not see the delight in her eyes. You wanted and children and to do the house, not to work or work somewhere for pleasure. But here is a real opportunity. There I have all the prospects, and for you from this end, too, will be only pluses. My wife, without looking at all this talk, was still walking around kind of strange and thoughtful. We agreed with her that I would go and find an apartment there, and she, when she had passed all her exams, would also follow me. Needless to say, heads of departments or branches do not just dismissed on the spot. When Andre and I arrived there, we realized that the front of work here is not even limited to the horizon. Everything was a mess everywhere, and before you start working here, you first have to set everything up and rebuild it. In short, the work was off the roof, plus all imposed in an unfamiliar city. With his wife, of course, I was in touch all this time, but despite this, I heard 3 weeks after the move is such a surprise. I think we should break up, she said to me out of the blue. I first thought maybe it was a joke. What happened? It all came together a little and so on. In short, a clear rationale for her decision. I then did not hear. I put it all down to distance and turned to the leadership. I was given a day to clarify the problems, and I went to his native city to his wife. When I arrived without an invitation or a phone call, I asked her to show me her social networks. There was one social network in particular that interested me. It was there that my wife seemed the most attractive in her photos than anywhere else, and if someone had picked her up on the internet, it would have come from there. I flipped through all of her dialogues, but it was clean. That reassured me a little, but as it turned out, it was for nothing. I tried it at home for 24 hours and she and I were back to normal. I thought at the time that she was just bored here, didn't want to be alone, or something along those lines, or maybe jealous of the non-existent lovers I had, but it turned out to be a lot more fun. I leave for Annestown again, and a week and a half later, I hear the same thing I heard 10 days ago again. What in the world is going on there? I asked my wife. I know it's exams and everything, but Tanya, you're not 16 years old. It's time you knew how to control yourself. It's like my wife's been replaced. I had a chat with my headmistress about it over a pint tonight. Don't think about quitting because of that, Andrich said right away. There is how much? 25? It's not much, but about this behavior could be 1,000 reasons, if not 2. And believe me, if you quit your job here and run away to live with her there, her such behavior will only end for a while. Then she'll find an excuse and it'll happen again. Except you'll be out of a job there, that's the difference. Andrich basically voiced my thoughts, and I did not quit at that time. It was literally 2 weeks later, my wife and I are communicating, and it's my birthday. Of course, I went back to my hometown, I wrote to my wife, she apologized to me and said that she was waiting and that everything would be fine. I am already without much enthusiasm, promising to come to her and make her the chief guest. But a few hours later, when I was already on the road, I get a text message on my phone that she has changed her mind. She's supposedly not in the mood to go anywhere and generally asks to give her some kind of break. I was, of course, insulted. At least on the same day could well pacify his complex nature, to put it mildly. But she, as in general, and all the other days today heard only himself. My birthday was over, I went back to Annestown, and then I got that fateful call from her number. I picked up the phone and heard an unfamiliar male voice. The guy explained from the doorstep that he had just found out that Tanya was married. It turned out that they had been seeing each other for a few months, and that she had not been herself for the past month. She does not answer all of his questions, does not go to clarify the relationship, and he decided to check his phone. As a matter of fact, he found me on it. He and I didn't have much time to figure it out when I heard Tanya's voice, and after a few seconds, the rustling stopped. At that moment, I didn't know what to do or where to go at all. A few hours later, I called her again, and she picked up her phone and almost cried, and asked me why I believe a stranger and not her. I did not talk to her again that night. I waited until the weekend and showed up at our rented apartment without warning. But I didn't find anyone at home. I called my wife on the phone, but she didn't answer, and after a while the same guy called me and asked to meet him. I was haunted by vague feelings. On the one hand, I would have talked to this fellow in a meeting without using words, but from his story and the way his wife reacted, I assumed that he was the victim here too. Long story short, he and I ended up meeting, and everything he described to me was completely unoriginal to me. Exactly the kind of behavior that my wife was broadcasting to me, she was broadcasting to him at this time as well. And so, for all these months, she kept him around as a lover. Now, as soon as I left and was away from her for a long time, he started to turn into a husband for her. Eventually, she started to toss and turn between me and him, which is pretty much what he and I both smelled. Long story short, the divorce petition has already been written and filed where it belongs. And I hope that I will remember this transfer in my life as an ordeal, which will go exceptionally well. And if, as it turned out, I was unlucky with his wife, I know for sure that I was lucky with the boss. Thanks to his advice, I got all the position, and it turns out that at the same time freed from the traitors. Betrayal in marriage can be hidden, but sometimes it shows up in small details. For me, it was where my wife put her car. I couldn't believe that such a small detail was the key to uncovering her infidelity. But that was just the beginning of my story that shook my life to its core. Watch this video to learn how I uncovered my wife's betrayal and how I handled the challenge and got my revenge hard. This story happened to me quite a long time ago, when we were all younger and the grass was, as they say, greener. Now, having gone through dozens, if not hundreds, of problems and situations in business and in life. I remember this story as a very important and useful lesson to me. A lesson in how you should never do anything. I was luckily very lucky at the time, and I'll tell you how lucky I was. I worked several jobs after college. I tried to do only what I was good at, but luckily I quickly realized that what, where, and when I did was more dictated by the market than by me. In general, at the time I had more and more work, more responsibilities, but the salary did not grow. One fine evening, my friend and I realized that we had saved enough money to try to open something of our own. In short, we opened a small stall. Over time, we opened a second one. The whole trick was that my friend had a supplier he knew, who could give low prices on purchases and wait with the payment. In our small town, to check the business at the time there was not at all, but in general to try to open something of their own was quite realistic. To make a long story short, over time, there were 6 such stores. Our business was already fully compliant with the law, but all sorts of deductions and repairs already had enough money. Profits are not bad, but only on the condition that almost all the work, well, except for sellers, we do with his friend. And then 2 fateful events in my life happen. Another year of such work, I already feel the financial ground beneath my feet, and there she is, my future wife. 25 years old, long hair, and besides, her name was romantic. Martha. She worked as an accountant in a local small office, which I also somehow dropped in on my job. Long story short, she and I ended up getting married, and we lived together for a year. The workload at her job was disproportionately higher than her salary. It's a familiar story because the same exact thing happened to me very recently. I suggested that she quit her job, but in the end, she refused to go anywhere. Suddenly, it dawned on me. A huge part of my and my friend's job on all of our RealeX is paperwork, all sorts of taxes and vendors. My friend and I have several times looking for an accountant for these cases, but have not found. Either the candidate did not inspire confidence in us, then demanded a salary, after which we would have nothing left, then something else. And then literally a month later, my friend Siryoga himself tells me, well, about my wife. So what is it that you have it so tortured at work? And our accountant, right, can she not cope with this our simple documentation? Anyway, long or short, after a while most of our paperwork at our job was taken care of by my wife. My friend and I were immediately relieved. With the payment and the work of my dear wife also agreed, and all seemed to be satisfied. But then something happens, which for me and my friend could have ended quite sadly. Our stalls, 2 of which are more like small stores, give quite a big profit. Everyone around here, I mean tenants, landlords, vendors, and suppliers, are quietly asking for a contract more and more often. My friend and I do not mind, but as it turned out, any contract is often just a piece of paper, which in the end does not guarantee anything. With us, did not pay once, did not pay twice, and after consulting with lawyers, they even laughed at us. Lawyers explained that the fact that everything in our business is registered in our name. Of course, this is great from a legal point of view. However, when we conclude contracts with someone from the outside, everything is not fair. It turns out that if my friend and I do not perform something under the contract, then we are responsible with all of our property. If the contract is violated by those with whom we signed it, it often happens that the person's property is only a stool by the window. And if we violate the contract, we can demand anything from our friend and me, while the opposite side will not give us a penny. I say this to the effect that we should be like everyone else. We should transfer part of the business to relatives, to my mother or wife. We basically already talked about everything with his wife. She agrees, but here I was lucky. I resisted the idea until the last, because we were not going to cheat anyone in the business. Why then all this mess with the re-registration? But my friend insisted, and if I had given in to him then, the business now, perhaps I did not have, and all thanks to my wife and someone else. Anyway, Now to the point of my luck. During this year with my wife, we bought her a small car together. She had some savings and I added on top. In general, she works, communicates with suppliers and all is well. Suddenly, one late night, my wife is talking to someone on the phone, and then she went into the kitchen and I hear a kind of talk. When I came back, I asked her who was it that we were talking to so late at night. She told me without a shadow of a doubt or embarrassment. What happened? Nothing. They did not figure out what I sent. Now it seems that everything is fine. Okay, at that time the phones were without all sorts of locks and passwords, and the next morning I had no trouble picking up the phone and see what kind of confusing suppliers we have. But I did not find anything special there. She was really talking to the vendor. A few weeks went by and a second ambiguous situation occurred, which made me tense. I was returning home in the evening after work and passing the local supermarket. I saw my wife's car in the parking lot. Great, now she will buy everything herself, and I do not have to stop here and run around the store looking for items from her list, I thought then. I get home and see that someone has drunk all my orange juice. I call my wife to ask her to buy some. She doesn't pick up the phone. Half an hour goes by, I hear the door open. Marta walks in, and all she has in her hand is her purse and her car keys. Where was she? I ask my wife and all I hear is that she supposedly went to work. Now we ended up having to get dressed again and drive to the same store. I asked her on the way, "So you were in this store half an hour ago?" "No, you're wrong. Already can't tell the difference between my wife's car. Soon, because of my work and how I look myself, you'll forget." Her attempts to talk some sense into me, though then no success on her part, but nothing else did our conversation go either. I asked her if the car was yours, and she answered no, that was it. In short, we drove home and I remembered the whole mess. Another week or so went by and I came home again in the evening. It was raining heavily outside. I pulled my car into the very first open space I could find, covered my head with my jacket and put it under my feet in the puddles, and ran into the driveway. I got home. My wife wasn't home yet. I got all dressed up, went into the kitchen, put my future dinner in the microwave, and while waiting for it to warm up, I started looking out the kitchen window. But the rain, I didn't look at that moment for long. I lowered my gaze to my car standing below and saw my wife's car very close by as well. At that moment, I almost began to believe in poltergeists and otherworldly worlds. But it was her car, and that time it was also near the supermarket. I dialed my wife's phone, and he didn't pick up again. Just like that time at the supermarket. Okay, so she's around here somewhere, but that's how to find out. She's not picking up calls from my number. Who could she have gone to somewhere in this neighborhood? Or maybe even nearby these houses. It's raining outside, that's why she parked her car here, closer. Of course, in this situation that night's call with the vendor also came to mind. And then it was like a no-frills hit me. I dial a friend. Gray, where does that supplier live? You know, the very first one. Sirioba gives an address in the countryside and says that he has his own house. How can he have his own house? I'd remember meeting him back then, and we met somewhere around here, not far from my house. And then Sirioga remembered. That vendor really lived in a small apartment in the house across the street from ours. Now, of course, he did not live there, but sometimes he rented the apartment. Maybe he doesn't, I said to my friend, and started to get dressed again. I got out of the entrance and walked to the car. I checked it out. It was definitely my wife's car. I ran up to the house and driveway, whose address my friend had dictated to me. I stood close to the front door of the driveway and called my wife. "There's my probe in your trunk. I need it right away. Where are you now?" I asked her. "I'm in the store, soon be home." "Hurry up." In just a few minutes, she comes out of this very entrance, and the look on her face in those seconds I could not describe. I pushed her aside and went up to the vendor. He opened the door without even asking who it was. I guess he thought she was back and had forgotten something. I spoke to the vendor briefly, but in a manly manner. That's pretty much it. Of course, Marta and I soon divorced. Luckily for me and my friend, this vendor needed Marta like a dog's fifth leg. Because of all the things I had done to him that night, he did not get back at us in any way. Although he had the opportunity to bring down our profits 3 times, if not more. And that's the best case scenario. After all, if they were in love, carrots, and I would then rewrite the firm to his wife, my friend and I would certainly not be sweet. The business would formally belong to the wife, and the supplier would only work hand and foot with her. And I would have spent the rest of my life in court to prove who earned what, who invested in what, and who is the real owner of the business.